It was supposed to be a night of harmless fun. Megan, Jake, and Tyler, 3 high school friends, had decided to spend the night at the old Ravenswood Manor, a dilapidated mansion on the outskirts of their small town. The house had stood abandoned for years, shrouded in mystery and tales of hauntings. They'd heard the stories, the flickering lights, the eerie voices, the sudden drops in temperature, but they dismissed them as urban legends. For Megan, this was an opportunity to prove her bravery. She had always been the most skeptical of the group, scoffing at the supernatural. Jake and Tyler, on the other hand, were thrill seekers, eager for a night of ghost hunting. The air was thick with the smell of decaying wood and overgrown vegetation as they approached the manor. The moon hung high, casting an otherworldly glow on the crumbling structure. The house loomed before them, its windows dark and lifeless, like empty eyes staring back at them. "Are you sure about this?" Megan asked, her voice betraying a hint of nervousness. "Come on, it'll be fun," Jake replied, nudging her with a grin. "We'll make some great stories for Monday." Tyler pushed open the creaking front door, and they stepped inside. The air was cool and damp, and their footsteps echoed ominously in the cavernous space. Dust motes floated in the beams of their flashlights as they explored the grand yet decaying interior. As they wandered through the darkened halls, they found remnants of the house's past. Faded photographs on the walls, a broken piano covered in cobwebs, and furniture draped in white sheets like ghostly figures. The deeper they ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. In the drawing room, they found an old diary, its pages yellowed and brittle. Megan picked it up, curiosity getting the better of her. The handwriting was elegant, detailing the life of Abigail Ravenswood, the last resident of the manor. The entries started innocuously, describing lavish parties and social gatherings, but soon took a darker turn. Abigail wrote of a mysterious illness that had befallen her family and the strange occurrences that followed. The whispers in the night, the shadows that moved on their own, and the feeling of being watched. The final entry was a frantic scrawl, describing a night of terror and blood, ending abruptly with the words, "They have come for me." "What do you think happened to her?" Tyler asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who knows? Maybe she just went crazy," Jake said, though he sounded less confident than before. Megan closed the diary, her skin prickling with unease. She glanced around the room, feeling the weight of unseen eyes on her. "Let's keep moving." The deeper they went into the manor, the colder it became. Their breath turned to mist in the freezing air, and an unnatural silence enveloped them. As they climbed the grand staircase, they heard it, a faint melodic humming drifting through the halls. "Do you hear that?" Megan whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. "Yeah," Jake replied, his voice tense. "It's coming from upstairs." They followed the sound to the second floor, where it grew louder, more distinct. It led them to a locked door at the end of a narrow corridor. The door was ancient, its wood warped and splintered, but the humming was unmistakably coming from behind it. Tyler found an old iron key on a nearby table and with trembling hands unlocked the door. It creaked open to reveal a dimly lit nursery. The room was eerily preserved, as if frozen in time. A rocking chair swayed gently in the corner, and a music box played the haunting melody that had led them there. Suddenly, the temperature dropped further, and they saw it. A figure, barely discernible in the shadows, sitting in the rocking chair. It was a young girl, her eyes hollow and her face twisted in a silent scream. She turned towards them, and the room filled with a deafening wail. Panic surged through them, and they bolted from the nursery, the girl's screams echoing in their ears. They raced down the corridor, the house seeming to close in around them. The walls twisted and distorted, and the shadows seemed to reach out, grasping at them. "We need to get out of here," Megan shouted, her voice shaking with fear. They stumbled down the stairs, but the front door, which had been open moments ago, was now shut tight. No matter how hard they pulled, it wouldn't budge. The house was trapping them, refusing to let them leave. Jake grabbed Megan's arm, his eyes wide with terror. "There has to be another way out. We just need to stay calm." But calm was impossible. The house was alive with a malevolent energy, and the air was thick with whispers and cries. They could feel the presence of unseen entities pressing in on them from all sides. They found themselves in the basement, the last place they wanted to be. The air was damp and cold, and the walls were lined with ancient rotting shelves. In the corner, a set of stone steps led down into an even darker, deeper part of the house. "We have to go down," Tyler said, his voice trembling. "It might lead to a way out." Megan hesitated, but the sounds of the whispers and footsteps above pushed them forward. The stairs creaked under their weight as they descended into the bowels of the manor. The basement was a labyrinth of narrow passages and hidden rooms, each more unsettling than the last. They stumbled upon a room filled with old, rusted tools and strange symbols carved into the walls. The symbols pulsed with a faint, eerie glow, casting strange shadows that seemed to dance and writhe. In the center of the room was an old well, covered with a heavy iron grate. The air around it was colder, and the sense of dread was almost unbearable. Megan approached the well, drawn by a strange compulsion, and peered into its depths. She saw nothing but darkness, but she could feel something down there, something ancient and malevolent. A sudden, overwhelming sense of fear washed over her, and she stumbled back, gasping for breath. "We need to get out of here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Now." As they turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind them, and the room was plunged into darkness. The only light came from the glowing symbols, casting an otherworldly glow on their terrified faces. Then they heard it, a slow, deliberate tapping echoing from the depths of the well. It grew louder, more insistent, and then a voice, low and guttural, began to speak. "You shouldn't have come here. You've awakened us." The floor trembled, and the walls seemed to close in. The air grew thick with a rancid stench, and they could feel the presence of something terrible, something beyond comprehension. Desperation took hold, and they began to claw at the door, trying to force it open. But it was no use. The room was alive with a dark energy, and they could feel the presence of the spirits closing in. In a final act of defiance, Jake grabbed one of the rusted tools and swung it at the door. The wood splintered under the impact, and with a surge of adrenaline, they managed to break it open. They stumbled into the hallway, the house's oppressive grip seeming to loosen. But their relief was short-lived. The shadows grew darker, and the air was filled with a cacophony of screams and whispers. They could see the figures now, ghostly forms, their eyes hollow and their faces twisted in agony. They reached out with spectral hands, their touch cold and suffocating. "We have to keep moving," Tyler shouted, his voice barely audible over the din. They ran through the twisting corridors, the spirits following them, their cries growing louder, more desperate. The house seemed to shift around them, leading them deeper into its nightmarish heart. They found themselves back in the drawing room, the place where it had all begun. The diary lay open on the floor, its pages fluttering in an unseen breeze. The spirits surrounded them, their eyes filled with a desperate hunger. In a final desperate act, Megan grabbed the diary and threw it into the fireplace. The flames roared to life, consuming the pages in a burst of light. The spirits screamed, their forms flickering and fading, and the house shook with a violent tremor. For a moment, there was silence. The house seemed to hold its breath, the oppressive weight lifting. They thought they had won, that they had banished the spirits, but the victory was short-lived. The fire spread rapidly, consuming the old, dry wood of the manor. The air was filled with smoke and the sound of crackling flames. The walls began to collapse, and the ceiling caved in. "Run!" Jake shouted, but there was nowhere to go. The house was engulfed in flames, the heat and smoke suffocating. Megan, Jake, and Tyler huddled together, the reality of their situation sinking in. The flames roared around them, and they could see the spirits, their faces now filled with sorrow and regret. In their final moments, they held on to each other, the weight of their decision crushing them. The house collapsed around them, the flames consuming everything in their path. The next morning, the townspeople found the ruins of Ravenswood Manor. The fire had burned through the night, leaving nothing but ashes and charred remains. There was no sign of the teenagers, only the faint echoes of their last moments lingering in the air. The townspeople whispered of the old manor, of the spirits that haunted its halls, and of the tragic fate of those who dared to enter. The story of Megan, Jake, and Tyler became another chapter in the legend of Ravenswood Manor, a warning to those who would dare to seek out the forgotten. And in the ashes of the old manor, the spirits of Abigail Ravenswood and the others lingered, their voices forever echoing through the night, waiting for the next curious souls to awaken them. The tale of Ravenswood Manor remains a haunting reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows, and the tragic fate of those who dare to confront the unknown. The manor, though now gone, lives on in the memories and whispers of the townspeople, a ghostly presence that can never be truly forgotten.